Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate that you chose to spend your time learning English together with us. And before we begin, I hope you are feeling relaxed and comfortable. Maybe you are listening while driving or walking or resting after a long day. And wherever you are, we are happy you are here with us.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you for being with us again. It always feels nice to imagine that people from many different countries are listening at the same time, all trying to improve their English step by step. And I think that is something very special because learning a language is not only about words, it is also about connection and confidence.
That is very true. And we always try to make these conversations feel natural and calm because many learners feel pressure when studying English, and our goal is to create a space where learning feels like a friendly conversation instead of a difficult lesson.
Yes, and before we go into today's topic, I want to ask you something, Mark. When you were learning another language, did you ever feel that you studied many words but still forgot them when you wanted to speak?
Oh yes, many times. And I remember feeling frustrated because I thought I needed a better memory. But later I realized the problem was not my memory, it was the way I was learning the words, because I was trying to memorize them without real meaning.
I think many people listening right now feel exactly the same way, because learners often say, I understand when I read or listen, but when I want to speak, the words disappear. And that feeling can be very discouraging.
Exactly. And that is why today we are going to talk about an easy method to remember English words naturally, not by forcing yourself to memorize long lists, but by understanding how memory works in real life.
Yes, because when we remember things from our lives, like a conversation with a friend or a funny moment, we do not memorize them intentionally. We remember them because they have meaning and emotion, and language learning can work in the same way.
I remember when I first started learning vocabulary seriously, I wrote long lists of words in a notebook, and every night I tried to repeat them again and again. And at the beginning, it felt productive, but after a week, I realized I forgot most of them, and that made me feel tired and unmotivated.
I had a very similar experience, and I think this happens because the brain does not like isolated information. It prefers stories, situations, and connections, and when words are connected to real life, they become easier to remember.
That is why the first natural method we want to talk about is learning words in context, because words are not meant to live alone. They live inside sentences and experiences. And when you learn a word inside a situation, your brain understands when and how to use it.
For example, instead of learning the word hungry by itself, you can imagine coming home and saying, I'm really hungry, I need to eat something, and suddenly the word becomes part of a real moment.
And when the sentence belongs to your life, memory becomes stronger because your brain connects language with personal experience.
Another very helpful method is visualization, because the brain remembers images more easily than abstract information. So when you learn a new word, try to create a picture or a small movie in your mind.
Yes, if you learn the word rush, imagine yourself running to catch a bus because you are late, feeling a little stressed and moving quickly. And that emotional image helps the word stay longer in your memory.
Sometimes I even tell learners to make funny or unusual images because strange or funny situations stay longer in memory, and learning becomes more enjoyable at the same time.
I once had a student who remembered the word whisper because he imagined two people whispering in a library while everyone looked at them, and he never forgot that word again because the image was clear in his mind.
Yes, humor helps learning a lot because when we laugh, we relax. And when we relax, the brain learns faster and remembers longer.
Another important idea is not learning too many words at once, because many learners believe that learning fast means learning better, but in reality, the brain needs time to absorb information.
That's true, and learning 5 words deeply, using them in sentences and hearing them many times, is much more effective than learning 20 words quickly and forgetting them later.
I think comparison also creates problems because learners sometimes compare themselves to others and feel slow, but language learning is very personal and everyone progresses at a different speed.
Yes, and when learners remove pressure and focus on consistency instead of speed, learning becomes more enjoyable and more natural.
Another natural way to remember words is through listening, especially listening to conversations, because you hear words used naturally and repetition happens without effort.
That is why podcasts are helpful, because you hear the same words again and again in different situations, and slowly your brain becomes familiar with them.
Familiarity is very important because fluency doesn't come from memorizing definitions, it comes from recognizing words quickly and understanding them naturally.
I also recommend using words immediately after learning them, even in simple ways, like saying a sentence out loud or writing a short note, because using language activates memory strongly.
Yes, when you use a word, your brain understands that the word is useful, and useful information is remembered longer.
And we should also talk about forgetting, because many learners are afraid of forgetting words, but forgetting is actually a normal and necessary part of learning.
Exactly. Every time you forget and then remember again, the memory becomes stronger. So forgetting is not failure, it is part of the process.
I remember one student told me she stopped worrying about mistakes and forgetting, and after that, she started speaking more freely, and her vocabulary improved naturally.
That happens because confidence allows the brain to focus on communication instead of fear, and language grows faster in a relaxed environment.
Learning should feel alive, not mechanical, because language is about people, emotions, and stories, not just grammar and vocabulary lists.
I like that idea very much, because when learners enjoy the process, they continue learning, and consistency over time creates real results.
Sometimes progress feels slow, but one day you suddenly notice that you understand more movies, or you speak more easily, and that moment feels very rewarding.
Yes, and I think that moment is very important because it shows that learning was happening quietly in the background the whole time, even when the learner felt like nothing was changing. And that is why patience is such an important part of learning English naturally.
I agree, and sometimes learners expect to see progress every day, but language learning is not always visible immediately because the brain needs time to organize information. And suddenly, one day things feel easier without a clear reason.
That is true, and I often tell students that learning vocabulary is like planting seeds, because you do not see the plant grow every hour, but if you continue watering it, one day you notice that it has grown a lot.
That is a very nice comparison, and I also think that repetition in different situations helps a lot, because when you hear the same word in different contexts, your understanding becomes deeper, not just memorized.
Yes, for example, if you learn the word run, at first you may think only about running fast, but later you hear expressions like run a business or run out of time, and slowly your brain understands that words have flexible meanings.
And that flexibility is what makes language feel natural, because native speakers do not think about definitions. They recognize patterns, and learners can develop the same ability through exposure and practice.
Another thing that helps remembering words naturally is curiosity, because when you become curious about a word, you pay more attention to it, and attention strengthens memory.
Yes, instead of thinking, I must remember this word, it is better to think, how do people really use this word? And then you start noticing it in movies, conversations, and books.
I remember learning a word once and then suddenly hearing it everywhere, and it felt surprising. But actually, the word was always there. I just started noticing it more.
That happens to many learners, and it's a good sign because it means your brain is becoming more sensitive to the language around you.
Another simple technique is grouping words by situation instead of by topic, because learning words connected to daily activities helps memory more than learning random vocabulary.
Yes, for example, learning words connected to morning routines like wake up, tired, coffee, late, hurry feels natural because those words appear together in real life.
And when words are connected to routines, learners can practice them every day without extra effort, just by describing what they are doing.
I sometimes tell learners to speak to themselves in simple English during the day. Not perfectly, just naturally, like saying, I am cooking now, or I need to finish this work, because that creates repetition in a very natural way.
That is a great habit, and it also reduces fear of speaking, because you practice without pressure and confidence grows slowly.
Confidence is very connected to memory because when people feel nervous, their mind becomes blank, but when they feel calm, words come back more easily.
Yes, anxiety blocks recall, and relaxation improves recall, which is why learning in a calm environment is much more effective than learning under stress.
I also think it is helpful when learners accept that they do not need to understand every single word, because sometimes trying to understand everything creates tension.
Absolutely. Understanding the main idea is often enough, and with time, the missing words become clear naturally through repetition.
Another interesting thing is that sleep helps memory a lot because the brain organizes information during sleep. So studying a little every day and resting well is better than studying many hours at once.
That is true, and short daily contact with English is more powerful than long, irregular study sessions because consistency tells the brain that the information is important.
I remember one learner who listened to 10 minutes of English every morning while preparing breakfast, and after a few months, she noticed that many words felt familiar without intentional memorization.
That shows how natural exposure works, because language becomes part of daily life instead of something separate.
And when English becomes part of your daily routine, remembering words feels effortless, almost automatic.
Another helpful idea is emotional connection, because words connected to feelings are remembered longer, so personal stories and experiences help vocabulary stay in memory.
Yes, if you learn the word excited and you remember a moment when you felt excited, the word becomes alive instead of abstract.
That is why storytelling is powerful for learning languages, because stories combine emotion, context, and repetition at the same time.
And that is also why conversations like this can help learners, because they hear vocabulary naturally repeated inside real communication.
Over time, learners begin predicting words before they hear them, and that is a sign that language is becoming natural in the brain.
I like that moment when learners say, I did not translate in my head this time, because that means understanding is becoming direct.
Yes, and that is a big step towards fluency, when words connect directly to meaning instead of translation.
So if someone listening today feels slow or worried about remembering words, maybe the answer is not studying harder, but studying more naturally.
Exactly. Make learning part of life, not a separate task, and allow the brain to learn through repetition, emotion, and experience.
And most importantly, be patient and kind to yourself, because language learning takes time, and progress often happens quietly.
Before we finish, we want to thank everyone again for staying with us through this conversation. And if you enjoy learning English through calm and natural conversations like this, please remember to subscribe to the channel.
Yes, subscribing really helps us continue making long conversations for you, and it also helps other learners find these lessons and learn together with our community.
And if this conversation helped you feel more relaxed about remembering English words, share it with a friend who is also learning English, because learning together makes the journey easier.
Thank you again for listening. And remember that learning English does not need to be stressful. It can be slow, natural, and enjoyable.
Keep listening, keep speaking, and trust the process.
See you next time.